you're watching the Creation Liberty Hour. This is show number 3 for August 15th, 2011. Well, my name is Chris Johnson. I'm the founder of Creation Liberty Evangelism, and as we state before every show, our ministry's purpose is to win the lost to Christ and to present the truth of science and God's Word. And we hold without apology that to position that God's Word is literally true and scientifically accurate from cover to cover, and that evolution is one of the dumbest and most dangerous theories in the history of mankind. It's not just a dumb theory, it's a dangerous religion. And that's the point we want to make. I'm joined today by my wife Lorraine, and she's my producer.
Hi everyone.
And we also have Tanya running scene admin on the chat scene in the background. So if you want to join in, if you're watching this from somewhere else, you want to join in on the chat, just go ahead and visit creationliberty.com and click on podcast, and that'll link you into the chat room and you can join in with us there. So tonight we're going to cover some details on DNA, because we had some people ask about that last time. We had an evolutionist join us last time, as well as some evolutionary arguments over something called ERVs is what they were bringing up. We'll discuss how basically it's not an evidence for evolution. And I read about this a long time ago, spent a very short amount of time on it, and when he brought it up last week, I couldn't figure out why I spent so little time on it. Now I know why. It didn't take me long to figure that out. So I thought today when we got started, I needed to define evolution, because all the time, you know, when I say evolution is not just a dumb theory, it's a dangerous religion, I need to define exactly what I mean. So I wanted to bring, this is a Science Plus Teacher's Edition. This is Holt Biology, well, it's general science textbook, okay? And in here, they talk about what they mean by evolution, all right? This is a section they talk about where they're understanding shell evolution. Now, part of the reason, maybe I should back up just a moment here. Part of the reason I brought this up, we had a gentleman on YouTube who has, kind of followed us around for a little bit. He's not really happy with our videos, of course, and that's what atheist or evolutionist is, happy with our videos. Oh well, praise God for it. We get harassed a little bit, hey. But anyway, he comes on and he asked a question. He's like, what textbooks are you specifically using? Is this just a small group of textbooks somewhere that you happen to just happen to have some bad information in them? Look, I'm not going to go through you and list all the textbooks that we have, but what I will do, if you will send me your textbook that is used in your public school, get a general science or biology, geology, astronomy textbook, science textbook from your public school, send it to me. I will point out all the things that are used as lies that are presented to the kids as evidence for evolution. And I'm also going to show you this little part right here from this one. This is one we happen to have. I'll show you the front of it just in case you want to take a look at this one. I can give reference to this one later if you need to. But it says that this Dr. Vermeij investigates evolution, which it says is the process by which living organisms change over time. Well, things change. Living things change over time. I mean, this is obvious. Look around you. It's not that big of a deal, because everybody knows this. And this is something they quote this Dr. Vermeij. It says, things do not remain the same. Things really do change. Well, duh, of course, they really change. And then he goes on to say it's a very important idea. Well, that's weird. It's a very important idea. What happens to the fact that things change? Let me show you the last sentence. Remember, they define evolution as things changing over time. Then it says, Dr. Vermeij works to find out how the animals that built the shells have evolved over millions of years. Well, wait, what happened to the general definition of change over time? You see, what they do is they bait kids into belief and say, look, you can see things change all around you. And therefore, we can conclude that the Earth has been here for millions of years. That's exactly what they're doing here in this paragraph. Now, there'll be some evolutionists that would object to that, but I'm telling you, this is what is generally taught in the textbooks. What they do is, it's called bait and switch tactics, is where they give them one definition of evolution and they switch the definition on them mid-sentence. And that's where I have a major problem with this, because it's kind of this magic trick hocus pocus that happens It's the kind of thing where, if you were going to say, I'm selling a brand new computer for 20 bucks, and somebody comes out to buy it, and you say, well, actually it's $2,000. That's illegal in this, at least in the state of Indiana. I think it's illegal all over the place in the entire country. It's called bait and switch. You can't advertise something, false advertising, just to bait people in and then switch the price on them once they get there. And that's exactly what they do in the textbooks. They're baiting the kids in with examples of microevolution, but then saying, see, that proves macroevolution. No, it doesn't. The two are night and day. It doesn't prove that at all. Now, if you want to believe in macroevolution, you're welcome to that belief, man. I don't care what you believe. It really doesn't concern me what you want to believe, okay? My concern is, number one, God's word is true. God's word has never been proven wrong, so why do we want to replace it with a dumb theory that's never been proven right? I don't see the point in that. And number two, you're extrapolating this belief. You're carrying over, you're crossing the line from science to religion when you go from micro to macro. And we have no evidence whatsoever of macroevolution, of biogenesis, or Big Bang, or any of those things. There are no scientific evidences of those. And we're going to discuss a little bit of that tonight. So I want to give a couple updates, and we'll get into some questions just a little bit later, some questions and comments. I know we already have some activity in the chat room, but first of all, the Facebook group on Facebook just, I guess, all of a sudden reappeared a little bit just earlier last week. I went ahead and fixed the link on the website. If you want to join in our Facebook group, for now we have it open. So far it's been fairly easy to manage. But we have it open. You're welcome to join in our Facebook group, join in the discussions if you'd like, and that link is at the top of the page. If you go to creationliberty.com, at the top of the page it says join us Facebook, and you can join in on that. And you can also follow us on Twitter as we give references to a lot of the things that we have on our website. Now, the second part is this thing on ERVs. Is this evidence for human evolution? Well, the short answer, no. It's a nice try, but no, and we'll discuss that in a moment. First, I want to discuss a common problem, though, I see with evolutionists, and that I saw last week when we had the chat room up. We had some folks in there debating back and forth, and a lot of the what I saw, the creationists that were in the chat room last week, we're asking questions to the evolutionists. What exactly do you mean this is evidence of evolution? So he would say, well, ERVs are evidence of human evolution. They said, what exactly do you mean? What are you referring to? And he says, well, signs and lines, the L-I-N-E and S-I-N-E, and then they'd say, well, what exactly do you mean? And he would keep giving abbreviations and long words and big numbers, everything that he knew full well that the average person was not going to understand. And I find this is a common mistake that evolutionists make, especially when they chat on low character comment things like YouTube and stuff like that. They always try to dazzle the audience with big, long words and big numbers, and they don't explain exactly what they mean. Anything logical should be able to be explained very simplistically in a few short sentences. I mean, it shouldn't take that much to explain something to someone. So, this is, now I don't want to encourage anyone to listen to Lewis Black. He's a comedian, but I remember many years ago when I used to listen to him before I really, became a Christian. He did say something very profound one time. He was talking about the Enron scandal, and he said, if you cannot explain simplistically what your company does in 1 to 2 sentences, it's probably a scam. And I would also put that to the evolutionist. If you cannot explain exactly what you're talking about for your evidence simplistically in a few sentences, it's probably not real evidence. It's probably hocus pocus. And that's what they try to do is it's bait and switch tactics. It's magician's tricks. It's like, okay, look at these, let me dazzle you with these big words and these big numbers and not really get down to the point, what is the evidence? So we're going to do that today with the ERVs. Now, let's see here. I'm going to go on because I'm going to go on my website right here, and we're going to follow along. I just posted a new article in the Q&A section. If anybody wants to follow along with that, it says, are ERVs evidence for evolution? If you go to the website, if you're watching the stream right now, you don't want to interrupt that, just right-click on the Q&A section and click open in a new tab. That'll open it up in a new window for you, and you can read along with it. And this is my goal in this entire article was to try to explain this whole thing very simplistically so the average person can understand it. I want us all to be able to understand what the argument is and what they're trying to say is evidence for evolution. So first, to define ERV, ERV means an endogenous retrovirus, okay? Basically, ERVs are like a DNA-shaped RNA virus. I'll tell you what that is in a minute. It's like a double helix, it's like a twisted ladder. And it comes from the cells within your body that copy their information to the DNA. So for example, ribonucleic acid is what DNA is, or excuse me, what RNA is, okay? RNA is basically almost like a secretary that takes a memo and hands it out to other people, okay? Basically, it copies its information from the DNA, and then it goes throughout the cell and performs all the jobs that are needed to create proteins in the cell. So basically, the process, it goes from DNA to RNA to protein, right? Very simple. Now, what a retrovirus does, okay? I think the gentleman that was on here last week, he referred to as a reverse transcription. Basically, all it is copying, but backwards, okay? So what it goes from the retrovirus to the DNA, then the DNA to the RNA, and the RNA to the protein, okay? So basically, all it's doing is copying backwards. So instead of the boss saying, hey, secretary, you take this memo and put this information on it, the secretary says, no, boss, you're going to put this information in there, and then I'll copy it and send it on. So that's what the virus does. Now, when it talks about an endogenous retrovirus, that means a retrovirus that is in, it comes from within, and it gets handed down genetically from generation to generation. So you have things with what you call like gamete cells, and all those are is like the sperm and the egg. That's it. And basically, a retrovirus, generally they don't get, there's no infection of the sperm and the egg cells by a normal retrovirus because of things called, it's called apoptosis, but basically all it is, it's like apoptosis. That's what, you can look it up on YouTube. You can watch videos of it and watch a cell die. It's basically what a cell's self-destruct button. So if you imagine that, say you have a submarine, okay, you have a whole fleet of submarines, and a ninja assassin appears on one of the submarines, okay, and starts killing off all the crew, and the captain's like, oh no, he's about to get to the main deck, I gotta do something because we're all gonna die anyway. So he hits the self-destruct button, blows up the submarine with the ninja assassin inside. And what that does is prevent him from getting to the sub to blow up all the other subs, and that's basically what the cell does. It hits the self-destruct button when something goes wrong, so that way it doesn't prevent it from spreading to all the other cells. So here though I have a quote where, and this is where it's very interesting. This is from Schwartz and Maresca. I guess you can read this on the website if you'd like. This is from their scientific research, and they said genetic alterations to germ cells are rare and have been mostly found to harm overall genetic fitness, not improve it. What would make retroviruses an exception? So basically what this is saying is altering sperm and egg cells has been found to be harmful, not beneficial. So why are we assuming that retroviruses are any different? Well, that's a good question, because what they're claiming is that these, the retroviruses are going to beneficially, in some ways, what they're claiming now. They said there are some beneficial mutations to these. But here we have some scientists that are saying, well, why are we looking to see, beneficial mutations for this? And again, when you say beneficial mutation, you also have to include, what do you mean by that? You may have something that might be a benefit for the moment, but when you put things back into a normal population, they're at a disadvantage. So take, for example, one of the beneficial mutations we hear all the time in our ministry as evidence for evolution is when they say, well, people in Africa who get sickle cell anemia will not get malaria, or are less likely to get malaria. And that is not they call that a beneficial mutation, but that's not a beneficial mutation. I mean, people who have sickle cell anemia are at a huge disadvantage if you put them back into a population of normal people. I mean, it causes all sorts of problems. Just because, the malaria cannot connect to the misshapen blood cells from the sickle cell anemia does not mean that's a beneficial mutation, okay? That's like saying, well, if I pull out all my teeth, I won't get a cavity. Okay, well, that might be true, but if you put yourself back into a population of normal teethed people, you're going to be at a disadvantage. So what they're calling beneficial mutations oftentimes are not beneficial. They might be beneficial for the moment, but that doesn't mean that it's an overall beneficial mutation, and it definitely doesn't mean that you're going to be able to turn a rock into a human over 4.6 billion years. That's never going to happen. So, and a lot of them at that point also will get on to, they'll say, well, we never say rocks can become humans. Okay, well, where did humans come from? And they'll say, well, we came from an ape-like ancestor. Well, where did that come from? And you're going to go back all the way in time, down to the fish and down to the amoeba, down to the single cell, and you ask them, where did the single cell come from? Well, it came from the oceans, from the prebiotic soup. That's exactly what the textbooks teach. Then, where did the prebiotic soup come from? Well, it rained on the rocks for millions of years. Well, where did these chemicals come from? The rocks. Ultimately, the evolutionists believe they come from a rock 4.6 billion years ago, and I admire their extraordinary faith to believe in such a thing. I just don't have enough faith to believe in that. So, now, first of all, we don't know how, when, or why ERVs ended up in the sperm egg cells to begin with, okay? Because that's something that doesn't normally happen with retroviruses. Now, how did it end up in there? There are all sorts of theories on how that happened, but nobody knows. And on top of that, we couldn't prove it. I mean, even if you had a theory, how are you going to prove that? So take this for example. Let's say you had a huge pile of British-made swords from the 18th century, and someone makes the claim that one of the swords was used personally by King George III. Is that a possibility? Sure.
Yeah.
Is it a possibility that none of them were used by King George III?
Yeah.
That's also a possibility. So how do we tell? How do we prove this? Well, we would have to find recorded documentation and go back and verify which one was used.
Libraries.
But the problem is, if there is no recorded documentation, you can't prove that at all. And so there's no way to go back and prove where the ERV entered into the family line, because they did find at one point, I think it was like 24 families when they were doing the Human Genome Project. They found 24 families that had the same ERV throughout all their genome. But the thing is, and here we still run into some more problems, because, well, maybe I should save that. I'll get back to that in a minute. We'll continue on here. First of all, what they're doing is that they will claim that, okay, we find these retroviruses, these ERVs, they're located in the same spot in the different genes on the different creatures. And so what they're doing is comparing. They say, okay, well, let's look at the ERVs in humans and the ERVs in chimps. And what they say, okay, wow, we found a similarity. The ERVs are appearing in the exact same spots most of the time for humans and chimps. Well, what does this prove? And they say, well, don't you see that proves a genetic relationship and history of the ancestry between humans and chimps? No, it doesn't, okay? Because first of all, you have to consider all the research. I'm going to read this. This is from Eugene, I want to say Sverdlov. I can't pronounce a lot of these people's names. I have a hard time with that. But they said, but although this concept of retrovirus selectivity is currently prevailing, practically all genomic regions were reported to be used as primary integration targets, however with different preferences. There were identified hotspots containing integration sites used up to 280 times more frequently than predicted mathematically. So what this is describing is what's called hotspots. This is where certain retroviruses attach to certain places. They have a preference of where on the gene they want to attach to. So basically, if you get to humans and chimps, which they say, they used to say are 89 or 98.6% similarity between humans and chimps, that's now been known to be 95% similarity. I've actually read some documentation where they're now saying it's like 93.3% similarity. So it's getting worse for the evolutionists all the time. But at the same time, the similarities don't prove evolution. We'll get to that in a second. But basically, they have these hotspots that they're attaching to. So the similarities that they are seeing are only the designed nature of this retrovirus. And then we also have to take into consideration, did the retrovirus, if generally it's going to, the apoptosis, it's going to commit suicide before it ever gets into the gamete cells, how did this end up in there to begin with? It's possible that it could have been something that was designed originally and put in the cell and has only gone bad since. And there's lots of things that we talk about in our seminar number 2 where we discuss those kind of things like wisdom teeth that were originally designed exactly when we need them. There's some people that actually still use their wisdom teeth today, that they're not, because some evolutionists will consider them vestigial structures. They're not vestigial. There's some people that actually still use them. And we discuss more details on that in seminar 2. But this is another from Lewinsky and Bushman. They said, different retroviruses have clear preferences for integration in or near particular chromosomal features. Research into mechanisms of retroviral integration site selection has shed light on the phenomena of insertion, mutagenesis, and viral latency. For those of you that want this in English, that means viruses have been shown to prefer hotspot attachment in the DNA. Okay? So, the ERVs of chimps and humans and other creatures line up not because they have common ancestry, but they line up because they favor attachment to the if you're comparing what they're doing, the entire argument of ERVs comes down to a comparison of similarity. Like ERVs in the way to react the way they're doing it. They first also similarity of ancestry. And the thing is, I'm going to get an illustration from a lot of the evolutionists' own mouth. Because you go into, for example, like on YouTube, I am accused many times of basically copying Dr. Kent Hovind and his material, okay? Operation Science Evangelism. And I got a few examples I have listed here. You can get these up on the YouTube videos themselves. They say, Hovind parrot, and how old is the second Kent Hovind, and this is a Kent Hovind impersonation. Okay, now stop and think about what they're saying. What they did is they watched my presentation, they watched what I saw in Kent Hovind presentation, and immediately concluded, hey, there's a common minor between these. Their own logic is showing them that there's similarity proves common design. And because of this, they are demonstrating by that logic. They are defying their own logic in order to believe in evolution, because they know the similarities prove the same designer made them. So that's the basics of ERVs. Okay, if you want a simplistic explanation, that's what that is. But if you go to the Q&A section on the website, take a look at this. At the very bottom of the page, I linked to a couple of very well-written technical research papers on this. I have to admit that some of the information that was in these research papers is over my head. But if you're into that kind of thing and you want to do more research, there's Linda Walkup and her technical journal that was published on junk DNA, evolutionary discards, or God's tools. There's links to it at the bottom of the page. Also, there's Liu and Soper, the natural history of retroviruses and the answers research, and that'll provide you more information on what they're claiming. But one more point I wanted to make on this that we need to understand. We know very, very little of DNA. Okay, we're learning more all the time. But the DNA, the Human Genome Project, first of all, was only finished, what was that? I can't remember exactly. That finished in 2003, am I thinking the right thing? I can't remember the exact year they finished that. But, roughly 10 years ago or so. It was a 13-year project, but it took them a long time. And we still don't know that much about the DNA. We especially don't know that much about retroviruses, viruses in general, and ERVs. We don't know that much about them, okay? And so for the evolutionists to jump to conclusions about, human ancestry before we even have all the information, this happens commonly, I find. And this is, I'm going to finish one more point here, and then we'll get to some questions, I promise. But this happens consistently with the evolution theory, because what they'll do is say, okay, for example, they find in the DNA, they find what they call junk DNA. I've heard this term all the time. Well, they found out recently, as the evolutionists were saying, see, junk DNA, this means, this was this vestigial DNA, supposedly, that, was remnants of our ancient past ancestry, and we just don't use it anymore. Whereas the creationists had predicted many years ago, a lot of the creation websites, they said, we're going to find a function for this DNA, I guarantee it. And today we have found function for that DNA. There's all sorts of things that we're finding out slowly that it does. Some of it performs jobs like when there's infections or viruses that they basically they feed on the junk DNA sections that are kind of duplicates of the DNA. They feed on those instead of feeding on the parts that are going to be harmful. So this, but at the same time, it's so funny. They said this is evidence for evolution, this junk DNA, and then when we found a purpose for it, they still claim it's evidence for evolution. The problem is the theory is not falsifiable. It's not a real scientific theory, because if it's there or if it's not there, in their mind, evolution is true. It can't be falsified. Okay, and this is what happens. It's a thing that happened in a long time. And of course, they're always relying on the latest research, this research that hasn't stood the test of time yet. Because it's basically, they say, well, the latest research says, okay, look, where's your research for the test of time? Because all these evidence they're using have been proven wrong later, or proven to have, hey, there's more than one possibility here, but they're only including one. And they've done the same thing, like, for example, vestigial organs. This is another good book. that you can get. Vestigial organs are fully functional, and it talks about these in here, where there was a list of, I can't remember, 80 or 100 different vestigial organs in the 1800s, and basically all of them.
Can you define vestigial?
Vestigial? Oh, sure. Vestigial basically means that, they say we have it now, and it's just useless. Like, for example, coccyx is one of the examples.
What's the coccyx?
Well, the coccyx is your tailbone. That's tailbone right here, right at the end of the your spinal cord, right at the end where you sit down at. I think, Lorraine can tell you where the coccyx is. You broke yours. How many years ago was that?
1.5.
Yeah, and she was in some excruciating pain.
Yeah. The point where you can't bend over. Coccyx actually does a lot.
Yeah, it does a lot of things, and I've heard evolutionists during debate say, well, the coccyx has no function. In fact, if you want to take a look at, let's see, I cover that in my seminar 4. I don't think I have that on the website yet. But we cover where the coccyx is claimed to have absolutely no function. And I do, definitely there are 9 muscles that attach to that tailbone, which you cannot perform some valuable functions unless you have them. I won't tell you what they are, but you need those muscles, okay? And she can tell you from firsthand experience that yes, you definitely need those muscles. Yeah. So the coccyx does have a function, and the tailbone, it has. You're somewhere. Why not there? But what they claim is coccyx has no function and was the remnants. Vestigial means you used to have a tail, and now you have a coccyx because the tail has disappeared over evolutionary, long periods of time, and therefore you don't need it anymore. So it's vestigial. Okay, that is not evidence for evolution, first of all, and second, because even if you didn't need it anymore, that still wouldn't be evidence because it doesn't tell us how we got here. You're just saying, well, we lost it. So the thing is, like I said, they used to do this. If you want to get this is by Jerry Bergman and George Howell. Vestigial organs are fully functional. You can go through. They give a whole list of all the old arguments they used to use about vestigial organs. For example, the appendix, they used to say, is vestigial. Your appendix, you can have your appendix taken out, it's true. But just because you can live without it doesn't mean you don't need it. Because if you can live without your appendix, but you can live without both your arms and both your eyes and both your legs, so that doesn't prove you don't need them, okay? And your appendix does have a function. It helps to provide immunity to all sorts of diseases. You can have your appendix taken out, but then you're susceptible to all sorts of diseases after that. They found out that there are functions to these things that the evolutionists were claiming were remnants of ancestry. But here's the problem. When we found that they are functional and they're exactly where they're designed to be, they still said, well, we still have evidence for evolution. You see, it's not falsifiable. It doesn't matter what they find. We could go out. We talked about dinosaurs last week. We could go to the fundamentally bring it back, put it in a park, put a saddle on it, and let the evolutionists ride it, and they will still believe in evolution. It's not going to faze them because they'll find another excuse for it. So the theory is not falsifiable, and the evidence is always shaped to fit their theory instead of their evidence.
Well, we have a little bit of contradiction here.
Okay, what's going on?
Well, Molecular Biovids is saying that Chris is saying that vestiges don't have functions, and that isn't true. He was also saying that
which vestiges don't have functions? That doesn't make any sense because that's what I'm arguing.
Because let me find the correct thing.
I'm saying, okay, I'll tell you what I'm saying. This book.
Oh, here we go.
Goes
he
over
says
vestigial organs that are claimed to not have a function. Evolutionists used to claim all the time this doesn't function. Like the coccyx tail from an ape-like ancestor. That's what they claim from a tree-climbing monkey, and that it doesn't have this anymore. So.
Section here.
Okay.
Molecular previously said vestige has always been defined as an evolutionary remnant that has lost or nearly lost its original primary function.
Mm-hmm.
If it has any current function, it's either a persisting secondary function or a function gained sometime after the loss of its primary one.
Okay.
A process called co-opting.
Exaptation. Okay. And co-opting. John, I hope you don't mind if I use your name. John, if that's okay. I'm not going to tell you where you're from or something. You know me, and I remember his name. It's just easier to say. I don't want to have to say your name, the whole thing. You don't see in that statement what you just said, the religious implications of this. What you just stated was completely religious. You have for that to what you believe, and that's perfectly fine. You can believe whatever you want. But they call that science. That's not science, okay? The scientific observation is it has a function, okay? What is it like? Well, we can use our logic and say, okay, all things that are functional, not just nature, man-made things. All examples we have of things that are functional are designed for their function. Now, if you want to go beyond that logic and to claim that this function goes by itself with no intelligent design behind it, and that it happened over a period of millions of years, you are welcome to that belief. Okay? But again, I admire your faith to believe in something like that. That's not science. That's not part of what the scientific evidence is. And that's where you use science to religion in there, in the same sentence, just what I talked about earlier, and didn't even see it. So again, that's a religious belief. I mean, did we have any other? We did have some other people asking what he was talking about. With,
yeah, hang on. We also
who's it from? You gotta tell me.
Same person.
Okay.
Yeah, just
sure.
give me a moment to find it.
And by the way, while she's looking for that,
come
folks, if you want to get your comment or question put on the podcast like this, the best way to get priority is give your name and location with your question. So, for example, if I was going to ask something, I would say, my name is Chris, I'm from Indiana, and here's my question. Okay, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to give us your address.
Please stop doing that.
Oh, my head shaking the table.
Yeah.
Sorry. So basically, just your name and location with it, and we'll give that. We're willing to speak with anyone. You don't have to do that, but we will drop what someone's talking about if another person comes their name and location, because that helps us out a lot.
Earlier in reference to ERVs was saying that hotspots are far from locus specificity. I looked up locus and it means center or like the point.
Okay.
So and then he cited 40,569 unique integration site sequences were analyzed. Of all those integration events, only 41 hosted two independent integration events at exactly the same base pair in the human genome.
Mm-hmm. So now what are you comparing? So if you have, the ERVs are more random, as you're talking about, and they're not appearing at the same point when you're arguing anymore. Because this whole argument came from, you see how we see the similarities between the ERVs in the humans and chimps. Because you denominated any of what you call your evidence for evolution because you don't know how to make it anymore. It's all randomized. So there again, I don't think that's an argument for evolution at all. And again, you couldn't prove any kind of millions of years from this data. What you're doing is seeing these minor changes. And it's true, like the RVs, they have potential just because of the transposable elements in them. That's when he talked about the signs and the lines last week. For those of you who are asking, they're short integrated elements and long integrated elements. They're just these elements that are transposed. It's a process back and forth. And sure, it can change things like eye color and hair color and all that. But just minor changes like that does not mean that it's need to extrapolate that and go beyond the scientific evidence to say that millions of years of evidence can place.
We have a small problem. Basically, everyone's reporting that things are very choppy with the use, and Tanya has actually lost feed.
Okay, things are getting choppy with the stream. It might just be our connection. I hope that's not the case. But I'm not sure what I can do about that. There might be nothing I can do. The only thing I guess you can do is just try to refresh the screen and see if that helps at all. I'm hoping it will. Because there's really nothing I can do about it at the time. I'm sorry about that. It's basically our limited equipment. So if anybody wants to generate restrictions so that way we can get a new laptop, we'll be happy to stream in high definition. And that's something we'd like to do in the future, but we just can't afford to. We're working between Lorraine and I. We work 4 jobs and run this ministry, so we have a hard enough time as it is trying to keep things going around here. So that's the best we can do. I'm sorry about that. Hope it's not too choppy in the future, but I think what's happening is, it's just the computer doing a lot. So, is there any other questions and things that we have?
No questions so far. Responded to the high susceptibility rate of retroviral bias pair reuse is 1 in 1,000.
Okay. Well, if you want to explain that in English, we'll be happy to discuss it. I mean, the thing is, there again, what you're doing is, go back to that one. I want to see that one again. Right up here. I'm going to quote that real quick. The highest observed rate of retroviral pair reuse is 1 in 1,000. Okay. Well, if you're going to claim that, I still, earlier made the claim that you're still breaking up your similarity if you're trying to get rid of the hot spots, and that's not going to prove anything between similarity groups or common ancestry.
Yeah, you're proving what you're saying there, because he then follows up saying almost all the 10,000s of ERVs in humans in the same loci in chimps. They're found in the same locations in chimps. So your point made earlier is still valid.
Yeah, well, it says, and yet almost all the 10,000s of ERVs are in the same location of humans and chimps. That's exactly what I was saying earlier. And the problem is, that's not evidence for evolution. Logic shows that's evidence of design, because these ERVs are designed to these particular hotspot locations. So the thing is, there again, you're trying to make the jump from micro variation. I mean, the question I posed to John is this change, is these micro changes from the ERV within the sperm and egg cells, or the gametes, is this sufficient enough evidence for you to believe that a rock can turn into a human over 4.6 billion years? Or an ape to a human over 4.6 billion years? I'll even give you that. It's basically, no matter what, it comes down to what you believe, not what the scientific evidence says. We have anything else going on, or we want to continue on? Yes or no?
You can, anyone have questions?
Yeah, if anybody wants to post questions at this point, we'll go ahead and take them. I mean, we could go for, the next half hour if you want to. Whatever happens, Lorraine and I we actually have to leave right after the cast. We're going to keep the chat room open. You're welcome to keep talking to each other and debate this out as much as you want. We'll try to keep some log of that I'll try to look at it when I get home. But we have to leave right afterwards. We have a meeting with a pastor, actually the pastor of the church we're going to be speaking at on September 10th. We're going to be covering the Garden of Eden and dinosaurs in the Bible, both back to back on September 10th. If you can make it out to Mooresville, we'd love to see you, and invite your skeptic friends. We'd love to see them. Anything else?
No one has posted any questions, so let's continue.
Well, we're going to continue on with the vestigial organs here, and it's very interesting that I get there's certain things that were claimed to be vestigial, like for example the snake skin. There are what they call rudimentary hind legs. In that's what they're named in all the textbooks that you read about this. Rudimentary hind legs of a python snake, for example. They'll give examples of 2 little claws. You can actually look this up online. You just talk about rudimentary hind legs or something like that, or just put the back claws in a snake or something. Type that into Google to find pictures of it. They're 2 tiny little bones that go up inside the snake's body. The problem is, for a long time they claimed, the evolutionists claimed, that these are rudimentary hind legs, meaning that they used to have hind legs and they lost them over millions of years of evolution. And they base this on that the hind legs have no known function. Well, that's simply not true. Again, and when they found out the function, of course, just like John had done earlier, it just makes an excuse. It's not really that, it's not a falsifiable theory. It just makes an excuse for what they find so they can hold on to the evolution theory. But here, what those claws in the snake are used for mating, okay? Because the snake doesn't have any arms, and he can't say "scoot over, honey," okay? He can't talk, so it has to be used for something. It's just used for getting more baby snakes. There's little muscles that attach to those bones, and they help position the snake properly so that they can reproduce properly and get more baby snakes. That's what the purpose of it is. And so they're positioned exactly where they need to be, and that was exactly what we predict according to the creation model, that every piece of that is going to have a function. You're typing furiously. Is there anything I should be aware of, or should I just keep going?
Well, you can finish what you're saying, but we did get a question, so whenever you're ready.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and take it, because I can talk about it.
Okay, well, this is from Miller again.
Okay.
And he said, on your ERV page, you quote, genetic alterations to germ cells are rare and have been mostly found to harm overall genetic fitness, not improve it. What would make retroviruses an exception?
Yeah, he says, on your ERV page, you quote that.
The question was, what would make retroviruses an exception?
No, that's not the question. He's just saying on your ERV page you quote. That's part of the quote.
Right. Oh.
That's not his question. That's
Oh,
part
I
of the
see.
quote on the website. That's all right. That's all right.
Okay. Well, you can tell I haven't read
And
it.
folks, you guys can go just go to Q&A and click on
Oh, he states that isn't true. Those are clearly secondary functions. Okay, well, if that's what you want to believe.
Yeah, if you want to believe that, you can believe that. But if you're saying that those are clearly secondary functions, well, you have to provide evidence to that and what you mean. Because how do you know anything in DNA is a primary function or a secondary function? You don't know that for certain. You don't know which one's the primary, which one's the secondary, because when you're claiming primary and secondary, you have a problem. Because you're claiming design when you say there's a primary function and a secondary function. Think about that.
Yeah.
Everybody stop and think about that for a minute. Because a primary function means this is what it's designed for. And the secondary function means this is an extra function. It wasn't the primary of which it was designed for, it's an extra function.
Yeah.
Okay?
Like,
And that's where, kind of like how, the car, if you can put it into first gear, you can put it into second gear, you can put it into third gear, okay? You can shift all the gears, and you can put it in reverse at the same time. That's an extra function it was designed for, or a secondary function that it was designed for. But you can't claim that out of evolution because you don't know which one was the primary and which one was the secondary because you have no recorded history of this, okay? Fossils don't come with a date stamped on them, and they don't, say made by, such and such creature in 40 million BC. You don't have any evidence of this, not any scientific evidence whatsoever. So, what's the matter? You seem like, what's the matter, Lorraine? You gonna say what you're thinking or not? Well, you don't have to. I mean, we're going through the chat thing. I'm just gonna go on with some other stuff if you don't have anything that you want to bring to my attention. But that's what I've got you here for. Is
He
to
has
check that
some
stuff
suggested reading for it. Apparently, he also says it's actually a quote from "Who is Your Creator" page on ERVs, which I don't really. I'm assuming you know what that is.
By the way, John, I wanted to make mention to you that I didn't actually read the entire thing, but you had requested that I would read over the common creationist responses to ERVs. And the problem is there's a reason I didn't read over. I skimmed through a little bit of it, but I didn't read over it because I found out what you were doing. You were responding to, what is the name of the organization now? I'm totally losing my mind. What is the name?
Know it?
Discovery Institute.
Yep.
Discovery Institute deals in intelligent design, but they definitely don't deal in young Earth creationism at all. So the arguments that the Discovery Institute would make and the arguments I would make would be completely different because the Discovery Institute, many of those people believe in evolution. And there's a problem there. So when you're responding to them, you're basically responding to other people who also believe in evolution. You're not really responding to what a real young Earth creationist would talk about, somebody who says evolution is a religion. And I still contend, even through all the ERV research, because I read a whole bunch about that stuff this week. Very fascinating. Don't let me get anybody wrong. The research on DNA and ERV research and the retroviruses, it's fascinating. I think it's really interesting. But is it evidence for evolution? Absolutely not. It's not even close to evidence for evolution. So that's all I'm going to say about that. I'll probably wait for Lorraine to get back with me on some things. We'll discuss another one, and I cover this one more. I cover a lot of these vestigial organs, the things on that in detail on my seminar number 4, which is Lies in the Textbook. If you would like to come and see that, you'll want to go to our schedule page and go down to, I think it's the one in October. I believe it's October 8th. And that one we'll be doing Lies in the Textbooks, a whole 2 hours of that. You can come on out. They're going to have lunch for everybody if you want to stay, and we'll have plenty of Q&A time where you can ask questions. But we're going to go through one by one through all the textbooks, and we're going to show the basic about 20 or so lies that are presented of the evolution theory to convince students that it's true, and basically the rest. So, but to continue on the vestigial organs section, we cover this on seminar number 4. The whale pelvis, it's got little tiny pelvis in the background. If you see a skeleton of a gigantic whale and this little tiny whale pelvis in the background. It's really tiny. And they say this is evidence of whales that used to walk on land through evolution. This is rudimentary pelvic leg bones that have no function is what the textbooks will teach, okay? And I actually have that documented somewhere on my website. I'd have to look that up and find out where it is. But rudimentary, pelvic leg bone, no. This is not evidence for evolution. Those whales need those, again, as part of their reproduction systems, okay? Again, they have a hard time communicating with each other, and it's certain, they have to make sure they can reproduce properly. Whales are pretty big, okay? And they have to scooch around the right spot in order to be able to reproduce, okay? There's special muscles that attach to those pelvic leg bones that help the whales reproduce. That's it. So why they're jumping to conclusions and saying that's evidence that whales used to walk on land, like for example the National Center for Science Education used to have, for the longest time they had for years their advertisement, Bossy to Blowhole, where they believed a cow turned into a whale, okay? And I would love to see their because they always claim they have evidence through missing links in fossils. No, they don't have any evidence for that. I'd love to see their best one on that one. Because they have whales in the water, who have their nose on the top of their head. Cows have theirs on the front of their head. Please show me the transition where the nose goes from the front of the head up to the back of the head. And basically, I don't think they're really fully understanding the amount of, you have to change skeletal structure, you have to change muscular systems, you have to change nervous systems. You have to relink the brain into its electrical systems for its nervous system to, make all these things happen. You have to create new functions for all these things. And they believe this all happened by random chance. I'm sorry, I don't have enough faith to believe that.
What exactly does it say instead of no function?
No function, what do you mean?
You're saying that certain things don't have a function. Well, what does it say instead of having a function?
What does it say? You have
yes.
I don't understand your question.
Okay, Andy, you're going to have to help me out here.
If you can rephrase the question, I'll be happy to do that. Let me go to the home page here and type in, see if I can find that, because I know I posted that somewhere. Let's see, whale. Let's see if I can just type in whale. Oh. See, I thought I posted that somewhere. Maybe I haven't on the website yet, but I need to post where the textbooks teach that the whale pelvis was vestigial and no longer, that basically it says that the cow went into the water and lost its legs and didn't need the legs anymore. It lost them, and then the pelvis is the remnants of those legs. That is a wonderful fairy tale, okay? But I think it goes in the garbage. It doesn't go in the textbooks to talk about science.
Molecular is saying a vestige isn't said to be a trait with no function. Okay, I'll wait for him to say something else.
Okay, what are you looking at?
Right here.
They have lost their primary function while still remaining a secondary function, but in order to use that, I forget what he was saying. I'm going to get wrapped up in this. If I don't, yeah. I'm going to get wrapped up in the chat here for a moment.
Favorite topic discussion in evolutionary circles.
Okay, let me read Robert's response here. I'm just going to read it out loud.
Yeah.
Might as well, keep something going in the stream. It says the evolution of sex and its accompanying reproductive capability is not a favorite topic of discussion in evolutionary circles. I agree, and I can tell you why, but I bet he's going to mention it here. He says, because no matter how many theories evolutionists conjure up, and there are several, there must surmount the enormous hurdle of explaining the origin of the first fully functional female and the first fully functional male necessary to begin the process. It is, and Robert, I agree with you that it's a problem, but I think that's an understatement. It's more than a problem. I have never heard even a logical idea. I've heard people in, I love to watch creation evolution debates, love it. I can't wait to get into my first one. That's going to be a lot of fun. But I've heard them all the time ask, how did this happen? And on top of that, think about this. Why would someone, first of all, how do you go from asexual reproduction to sexual reproduction? First of all, because if you could just reproduce yourself, isn't that much quicker and easier and safer?
Yeah.
And then on top of that, why would any being want to create more of itself? Why would it want to duplicate itself? Isn't that just more mouths to feed? Why not just evolve the ability to live forever?
Complex.
Did you get that? Why not just evolve the ability to live forever? Wouldn't that make more sense?
That would be better, but if you had a God complex, you would want to control other people and you'd want them to be like yourself.
Well then, but that's another person for competition who can overthrow you. You see, the problem is there's no logical reason. There's no logical reason.
Them to be what you want.
There's absolutely no logical reason, right? Why anybody would want to reproduce more of themselves, unless, of course, you have a biblical reason. Now, of course, the reasoning from the evolutionists will be, well, because we have this desire, we have this yearning. Well, first of all, you can't explain where the yearning came from, and second, that's a logical fallacy because now you're arguing from emotion. Okay? You're not arguing from anything that's really scientific, and there are absolutely no logical explanations of how sexual reproduction would have ever evolved. It doesn't even make any sense. There's not even a good idea about how it happened. So, if we don't have anything else, probably, well, we're actually getting close to time and we're about to wrap this up. Do you want to feed me anything more before we end this? Lorraine? No? Okay, well, I'll talk about one more because we might take about, a little bit. So far, let's see here. Of course, we talked about the teeth, and the interesting thing about wisdom teeth is that, there are some people that are much larger. The taller and bigger you are, the bigger your jaw gets. And your teeth are going to grow in right about the time you need them. But there are some theories about that, about what it would have been like before the flood. And like I said, this is completely theory. We don't know this for certain, but there has been some evidence to indicate that man used to mature slower than they do today. That people used to hit puberty a lot later in life than they do now. And that evidence comes from Jack Cawazzo's book, Buried Alive. You can get information on that. And they discuss the Neanderthals, how the Neanderthal is actually evidence of, things like acromegaly. Acromegaly is where, you have secretion of growth hormones in your bone structure. So, for example, people, if you ever see, like the cartoons where they draw really old people, they have long noses and long ears. This is where the tip of your nose and your earlobes, they never stop growing your entire life. The brow ridge of your eyes never stops growing your entire life. So the Neanderthals, they definitely looked a little different, but they were normal human skulls. And they showed evidence of this acromegaly, where they were growing longer, living to be longer. Some have estimated the Neanderthals living to be about at least 200 to 300 years old. They were, it's predicted according to the creation, biblical, that they were post-flood people that were still living years in age, and they were living just a lot longer. So, and these secretion of growth hormones was causing these a couple of the more pronounced eyebrow ridge and things like that. So they were showing signs that they may have matured slower, and Jack Cawazzo does a good job, because he went over to France and studied the actual bones. Most people who get to study these things, evolutionary students in colleges, they only get to study the replicas. Jack Cawazzo got to go in and look at X-ray radiation, the actual bones, and he'll tell you all the findings in there. I think it's about perfect, his explanation there. So anyhow, kind of, Bobby, what are you doing?
Trying to copy and paste this, which is not cooperative.
Plenary. I'm not sure.
Planarian.
I'm not sure why you're looking at that.
Word, so I am defining it.
Go right, yeah.
Okay. So a planarian is a free-swimming, mostly freshwater flatworm of the class of blah, 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 blah. Anyway, he asked, how does that have a desire to live? Which, okay, yeah, so it's a worm, but worms have a desire to live too. Otherwise, they'd kill themselves or not exist anymore.
Well, I mean,
any creature has a desire to live. That's called survival of the fittest.
No, it's not survival of the fittest. What are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about. Survival of the fittest is a tautology. That's a sentence that means absolutely nothing.
But it still exists.
Why is it the fittest?
All right.
What's the matter? Why is it the fittest? It's the fittest because they'll say, well, it survived. Well, why did it survive? Because it's the fittest.
Well, what I meant to say was survival instinct. Everyone has a survival instinct. It doesn't matter how big or small you are, or where you are in your evolutionary standpoint.
Okay, well, the whole purpose that I was talking about here, that the Bible, God gave the purpose of the living creatures. He said, be fruitful and multiply and fill up the earth. That was the first commandment God gave to man and all the animals and everything. He gave them the commandment to go fill up the earth. So the desire to live is the desire to reproduce in order to fill up the earth and have more. That's the whole purpose. Evolution.
Worms have brains, don't they?
What?
Worms have brains, don't they?
That's a good question. I don't know. I need to go look that up.
Because he's making an interesting point.
What's that?
He says, let's go back. The organisms without brains, cerebral ganglia, don't desire at all.
Well, first of all,
it's
you've
still
never
an
been a worm,
instinct.
so you don't know. Okay,
It's
never
still,
been.
it's still an instinct. It's still-
You've never been a worm, so you don't know. Okay, you can't claim that at all. But second, even if you want to say that, okay, first of all, we have to even define whether it's alive. According to the Bible in Leviticus 17:11, it says the life of the flesh is in its blood. So, for example, they say, well, didn't Adam and Eve kill plants, eat fruits and vegetables and kill plants? Well, are plants alive? They don't have any blood. The Bible says they wither, they fade. They don't die. They are killed. And so insects are the same way. Insects don't have blood, so insects are not technically alive according to the biblical model. So even though that may be the case, at the same time they are also reproducing and trying to fill up the whole earth and do that kind of thing. So whether or not you want to claim a desire or not, I don't know if you can claim desire for those kind of creatures. I'm not arguing against that, but you state it like a fact as if you know when you don't really know. You're just saying, this is what I believe. Okay, you can believe that, and I'm not saying that's necessarily false. That could be a possibility. But that's not necessarily true, number one. And number two, the commandment from God is the reason why all things are reproducing. It's not because of any evolutionary stance or any desire that just evolved in creatures. This is because God commanded it to begin with. So that's just the biblical model. Well, unfortunately, we really have to cut this off. We don't have any time. Lorraine and I have to drive out to Franklin tonight, and we still had a lot to do this evening, so we really got to get out of here. Listen,
thank you for everybody for coming out, and especially our new people.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
great to meet you, and I hope you come back.
Yeah, I'm really glad you all joined us, and especially some of the, we love to have the atheist and evolutionary perspective in there. Whether or not we agree with it, we love to have you guys in here, and we really enjoyed you coming out, especially, I think, John, I don't want to give your location. I said I know you were sensitive about that, and I'm sorry. It's easier to say your name. I hope you don't mind that. But I do really appreciate you coming out. I also appreciate Caleb joining us. I like to see him again. This is another guy whose heart's really on fire for Christ, and we enjoy him. Who else we had? Robert actually joined us today.
We had a Robert in here, and he seems to have gone already.
Robert Bond, I think he was his name.
Yeah, Bond, that's correct.
We appreciate him. He's been very outspoken in support of our ministry, and I really appreciate him joining us. And so, and Andy also joining us. Thanks for coming.
Yeah,
Especially
thanks for
one
coming
quick
back.
thing I got to mention.
The class is going well.
One quick thing I got to mention before we went to Andy said something hilarious today, because we actually saw, before we log off here, that the American Atheist Association is filing suit against a cross monument at the World Trade Center. I kid you not. Okay, they're filing suit against the cross. You can go look this up because they're so offended by it. Now it's amazing that all the time, I hear atheists do this all the time. Now, it's not all atheists, but most atheists I listen to online, they say, well, you Christians are intolerant of everybody. But yet, the Atheist Association is the one who's filing suit against a cross. It's not even a living entity, and they're filing suit against it. It's ridiculous. But,
well,
you know,
I would counter that. I don't think we're what was it? What'd you say?
Well, if you're going to speak, you got to speak up so they can hear you. I can't. Well, anyway, okay. Well, here's the thing. It's just simply, it's not even a logical thing to do. However, Andy said something really hilarious on Facebook today. He says, well, you know, because they're suing all these things that are representative of a cross. And it's very interesting that even the rotunda at the Washington, the rotunda in Washington, you know, the one with all the paintings in it, the giant famous paintings, I mean, they have crosses all over the place in those. Are they going to sue the paintings? And Andy makes the comment, he says, well, the word atheist has 2 crosses in it. Is he going to sue that word too for having 2 crosses in their, you know? I thought that was pretty funny, actually. It made me laugh. I thought it was hilarious, but it is kind of ridiculous of that. And it's not that, you know, I think Christians are extremely tolerant of people. Yes. We put up with a whole lot.
That's what I was trying to say.
Oh yeah, we're extremely tolerant of people. We put up with a whole lot, but the Christian, the biblical Christian, stands for truth. Okay, and it doesn't matter what you believe. We're still going to tell the truth, no matter what, no matter whether you like it or not. So.
Have you heard of laminin?
Laminin?
Yes.
Chris, you know what? Laminin, I don't even know what it is.
No, we have not.
So you know what? I'm going to go look that word up, and we will have to save that for next week, because we really got to cut this off. We're at the end of our hour, and like I said,
shoot Chris an email, and
send me an email.
Talk about it.
My email's on the website. Just click on contact. My email's on the website, and you can just email me any questions you want. And in fact, if you want to email me some questions, we can discuss them on the podcast next time. If you want to email me ahead of time.
It's a cross-shaped binding protein.
Oh, cross-shaped binding protein. Well,
how cool.
Again, you know, like I said on the Facebook group about the crosses. I mean, when people, this cross was basically, it was something that was standing up in the rubble, and they're saying, well, this cross, it has divine symbolism and all this stuff. I'm kind of careful about that stuff. I would be cautious about some of those things because, you got people like, the Catholic Church, they see, Mary's face on a piece of burnt toast and will bow down and worship it. So I don't think it's something that we need to start, claiming, oh, this is in this shape, well, it's divine.
Yeah.
I think we should be careful about how we jump to conclusions on that. But
it's a symbol, but it's not something that
yeah.
we need to worship.
So the cross-shaped thing is that might be cool to look at. At the same time, we don't jump to conclusions on that. But the good question would be that laminin, if it isn't a cross shape, are the atheists going to file suit against that too? Who knows? But anyway, I think we're done for now, guys. We really look forward to seeing you all next week. Invite your skeptic friends in here. We'd love to hear from them too. And I think that's all we're going to do. So next week, it's what's next week? August 22nd is next week, correct?
I have no idea.
I think it's Monday, August 22nd, 7 p.m. We'll be here. We'll open up chat a half hour beforehand so you guys can start talking. And we will see you guys next week. Thanks for joining us. And we'll hit that right there.